Welcome to the Very Liberal Podcast with me, Oaten and Opik,
and me, Mark Oaten,
where we look at the world's affairs from a liberal perspective. And today we're going to be talking about international politics. What do you think of Donald Trump's chances to be the next president of the United States?
I think it was a done deal if Biden had stayed. I think it looked an even greater done deal after the assassination attempt on him. But I'm beginning to think, actually, maybe there's been a bit of a shift. And Kamala Harris, and I got her name pronounced correctly.
According to whom?
It's Kamala Harris.
That's Kamala Harris.
Kamala.
You call me Lembit Opik. My actual name's Lembit Opik, but I don't complain about that.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, I call you lots of things.
I know you do lots of things as family.
Look, I think there's been a shift, and I think she's done really well in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I notice a change in the approach that she's taking. She's being more aggressive to Trump. She's taking him on.
No, she's not.
She
refused to have a debate with him.
More than Biden. But she is increasing her language of hostility towards him.
But she refused.
And he's such a bully towards women that I think that's what he did.
Come on.
He does bully women. He intimidates women. He did it to Hillary. He did it to Hillary Clinton. We've talked about that before, about how he intimidated her during the debates. So I think she's taking the right approach.
She doesn't really debate. She just creates word salad. The burdens of the past can't deal with the burdens of the future, whatever it is. I don't even remember the names. She thinks they're clever phrases. Secondly, Tim Walz, her running mate, a man who wants to expand all this California type green rubbish across the USA.
But you're forgetting, where does he come from? It's a swing state, and you only ever pick a VP from a state which you need to win when it comes to the election. There's probably going to be about 4 or 5 states that decide this election, and she has had to pick somebody from one of those who is popular in that state. So from that extent, it's a clever move.
But there's nothing much that she does is clever, in my view. For a start, she can't distance herself from the fact that she was Joe Biden's henchwoman for ages. Secondly, her main speech catchphrase is, that's what she says.
but you making her sound weird, but compared to Trump, she's normal. I mean, Trump is completely weird.
No, he's not. He's smart. Damn sight smarter than Kamala.
Well,
Kamala.
Well, at least he's easy to pronounce. I'll give it that. Yeah, we will see, and we're going to keep coming back to this over time on the podcast.
But one thing that Trump has said is, I'll end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. Now, whether he's telling the truth or not, I think he probably will end it quickly, because he just will withdraw support from an unwinnable war in Ukraine. Kamala Harris, no such luck. She's been conspiratorially supportive of putting hundreds of billions of US dollars into a war which has been run by a former comedian with no military experience whatsoever.
But we have to stand loyal and stand together with Ukraine. We do, because but Putin is a threat. We know
he's going to invade and conquer Britain, is he?
Well, look, if you'd had this conversation 5 years ago and said he's going to, invade Ukraine, you might have thought that was unthinkable.
Well, Nigel Farage predicted it. Nigel Farage predicted it a decade ago. He said that NATO and the West are behaving in such a way that there'll be a war in Ukraine. So actually, he was right.
And Trump would do the same, wouldn't he? Trump would give in to Putin.
Give in. In other words, Trump would sue for peace. Let me ask you this question. Do you think there's any military way that the West can run this proxy war with Zelensky in charge without going nuclear?
I think it's a really tough one to see where the end game will come. I understand
negotiation.
I understand the point about, but what you cannot do is negotiate from a position of weakness. And if Trump comes in when everybody knows he's going to withdraw American support, that creates a weak negotiating position.
But we've got a weak position. We're losing.
A weaker one if
the West is losing.
No, they're not losing. They're not losing.
Oh, yes, they are.
You're making it sound like Dad's arm.
No, it's a pantomime. The whole thing's a pantomime. Zelensky.
It's not a pantomime. It's an extremely serious point of principle. That Ukraine has been invaded by Russia. And what do? We stand together, united, and Trump would break that unity, and that would create a weak position for us.
But it's a weak position because every week that goes by, it seems to me that the Russian pretty skilled military, I'm not talking about the rights and wrongs, by the way, here. I'm talking about the reality. The military is entrenched. Ukraine is holding the fort just about because tens of billions are going in there every month or two. And Zelensky, who doesn't seem to be much of a military leader, in my view, I'm not a military leader either, but he doesn't seem to be doing a great job. All he does is wins and require more money. For example, the F-16 aircraft which have been supplied to him, his people can't fly him. And I got in fairly confident authority that they're talking about French pilots. Now, I want to look into that, but all of it is suspect. And what I'm saying to you, Mark, is sooner or later we have to sue for peace. And one last thing, you don't have to be an apologist for Putin to have known the war was coming. And Nigel Farage, I don't think of him as an apologist for Putin, but he called it right a decade ago, because this is of strategic importance to Russia, and it's not of strategic importance to the West.
But it is. If you talk to somebody from Finland, for example, they take a very, very keen interest on how robust the allies are going to be towards Russia. They are literally neck and neck with Russia. It concerns them hugely. That's one of the reasons why they've joined NATO. So I think it is important that NATO sticks together, and I think Trump would be misguided. But when we look at where the solution will come from, I remain hopeful that at some point the Russian oligarchs who are losing money daily because of the sanctions will eventually turn against Putin. I think there is, if you say, what are the routes to peace? How is this going to be resolved? Yes, okay, there may end up being some negotiation, but it should be done from a position of strength, not announcing you're going to withdraw your support for Ukraine. But the other solution is inwardly within Russia. Can we see circumstances under which Putin will eventually lose support? There will be a rebellion against him.
That's just pie in the sky. I just don't believe that. Even if you thought Putin was completely in the wrong and the West was completely in the right to support Zelensky, I don't think militarily it can be won. Now, I have to say, I think it's much more complicated than that. But however you look at it, it's obvious there has to be a negotiated solution. And once again, let's not make this into a black and white issue. There are issues on the border. There are a lot of Russian citizens on the Ukraine side of the border who actually have grievance about how they've been treated under Ukraine. But let me tell you something which I know. I go to Bulgaria quite a lot, and about 3/4 of the population of Bulgaria is vaguely sympathetic. It's an EU country, sympathetic to Putin and to Russia. And about 2/3 of the parliament is. Now, as I say, we don't really need to resolve whether Putin's got a point or not. In the realpolitik of international conflicts, you have to negotiate a settlement unless you want total victory. And total victory is impossible here.
Well, look, where I certainly agree negotiations have to take place is when you come to what's happening with Israel.
Yeah.
I think everybody who looks at this, and many people in Israel who started off saying, no, there needs to be a robust attack on Hamas. Even some of the more extreme are now realizing that there has to be some kind of peaceful negotiation outcome to this. But it seems that actually Israel are ratcheting the heat up even more at the moment with some of the attacks that they're doing outside of Hamas.
Yeah, the big problem here, I think, is ignoring the lessons of history. In Northern Ireland, where I grew up, the British establishment tried everything. They tried oppression, they tried infiltration, that infamous, horrible scum known as Steak Knife, who actually killed people undercover, essentially with the endorsement of the British state. It's unforgivable. And by the way, if you are the British state, why don't you get in touch at oatenopik.com and tell me if I'm wrong about that, but I'm not wrong. And eventually they negotiated a settlement. It took 10 years. I was involved in that 10 years. But you had former terrorist roundtables and lives have been saved. Netanyahu thinks that the more people he kills in Gaza, mainly civilians, I have to say, that the weaker Hamas is. That's not what happens. What you do is you create a recruiting sergeant, in this case for Hamas, because if your family's been killed in an attack, what have you got to lose?
Your brother or your son comes out and becomes another enemy. And this is the difficulty. It just perpetuates itself. But I think what's so dangerous about the current events is what's happening in both Iran and Lebanon, where this is moving from being a Israel-Gaza conflict into the wider.
Well, it has expanded.
It's expanded into the wider part of the region, and it's a very, very troubling region. And this is just adding fuel to the fire.
It's really dangerous. I mean, you've seen it. The events over recent days have been really worrisome, and the rhetoric, and not just that, the violence. What I'm worried about though here is, as with just about everything else, bringing it back to the UK, Keir Starmer hasn't lifted a finger to change UK policy here. He's promised billions to Netanyahu. He doesn't seem to understand the suffering in Gaza. He lost votes for that. One of the reasons he did so appallingly badly in the general election, getting 20% of the eligible electorate and a third of the people who bothered to vote, is because he looks like he's a warmonger. And I just don't understand how someone in the Labour Party, a party with a history of pacifism, is just carrying on what Rishi Sunak did.
And I mean, it cost them 5 or 6 seats where there was a strong independent candidate who took a different view about the policy in relation to Israel and Gaza. But there has to be, on this, a peaceful outcome. I actually remember visiting Israel some years back at the point when I think it was the Bill Clinton negotiations were so close to being able to get an outcome on this. It is a tragedy. I mean, I went into the Gaza Strip. I've been to visit both sides, and it's a humanitarian disaster, but it's one which has lasted for over 60 years. And I'm still not sure I can see how this will ever resolve itself.
Well, a two-state solution is inevitable.
But we've talked about that for decades.
It is, and we nearly had it.
Yeah.
But Netanyahu, there's an irony here. Netanyahu and others say, "Oh, from the river to the sea" is a terrible slur. They want to drive the Israeli population to the sea. You could argue that's what they're doing to the Gazans. They keep moving them around, one safe area to another, as if there's this relentless assault on the Gazan population. They will find every single Hamas sympathizer. That's not how these kinds of operations work.
Do we see Trump acting in the way that Clinton did and trying to come in and actually negotiate some kind of peace, take that leadership? Because often it's only America that can actually be the one that leads on this when it comes to negotiations. Or is he going to just make it worse?
They do have the power just to turn off the tap, or to threaten to turn off the tap of support. And Netanyahu will then be in a lot of trouble. But, you know, I don't really have a clear prediction on that, because Trump also, he kept a promise. He moved the embassy, I think, to Jerusalem. Whether you agree with it or not, he made a promise and he kept it. And that was welcomed in Israel. I don't know what he would do in this situation. What do you think?
I mean, I think that he will probably want to play some kind of peacekeeping role. I think that he will look at this presidency in a way in which he wants to maybe make more history than he did in the last presidency. And presidents who will be serving their last term tend to have a different approach than in their first 4 years. So actually, I think on this issue, he might see that he can not rehabilitate himself, but he can have the name Trump go down for good historical reasons rather than some of the negative ones. But unfortunately, I think that we will be talking about both Ukraine and Israel for many, many months to come without much of a solution.
I can summarize what I think that Kamala Harris would, she would do if she gets elected president.
And on that cheerful note, on a difficult subject, please check us out on our website, oaten.opik.com. Let us know what your views are, and do subscribe as well if you want to hear more.
It's oatenopik.com.
Did I say
oatenopik.com?
What did I say?
You never say oatenopik.com.
What do I say?
What's wrong with you?
I'm dyslexic.
You put dots in when there aren't any.
Oh, I'm just dotty.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, honestly. It's war, Mr. Grimsdale. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Lembit Opik.
And I'm clearly a complete mess. My name is Oaten Mark.
And this was the Liberal Very podcast. See you next time.